Now, we believe, based on both scripture as well as tradition, that Isaiah was probably the oldest of the prophets, although we're not sure. It's very possible that if we consider John, who wrote the book of Revelation, as one of the prophetic members of a very special select group of people, and indeed, Isaiah was one of those folks. It is also suggested that he may have prophesied for something close to 60 years, so that's quite an extensive period of time. And he didn't allow, as you can tell, old age to stop him. Here we go. I'm going to do some thinking with you about aging. And I want to share this passage that comes from Isaiah. It's in the 40th chapter, and it is a really special one. I want you to have these words. So these are the words that come from Isaiah. He gives power to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Even youths will faint and be weary, and the young will fall exhausted. But those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Now, in so many ways, these words coming from Isaiah are words that have to do with the way in which God nurtures us throughout the age of our life. And so the prophet who proclaims these words on behalf of his God is making it very clear that at every age, God is there. There is no question in Isaiah's mind. And indeed, we who have been part of the church have that message given to us over and over again. There's an interesting story in legend, because it's not in the book of Isaiah, but the legend is that Isaiah had, I guess the term is ticked off the king, who was the fourth of the four kings that he spoke to. And he told that king that his son, which had been born, was going to be evil. Well, he didn't like that, but more importantly, when King Manasseh became the king, he called Isaiah into his chambers and said to him, I want you to retract what you said about me. Now, let me tell you, there's courage in those prophets. Isaiah said, no, I won't do that. And then as a recognition that his life was in danger, as was often the case for prophets, he ran into the wilderness, but was captured. He was then tied up, stuffed inside a rotting out tree trunk, and there he was, stuck in that tree trunk. And you won't like to hear this, but in fact, the king then said, cut that tree trunk down. And so the legend is that he was cut in half as they sawed the tree trunk down. You may recall Jesus pointed out that prophets had been killed by any number of those who disliked their message, disliked their prophecy, and disliked their speaking truth to power. I want to think about aging, and you all know that I celebrated my 87th anniversary of my birth. And it provides sometimes a stimulation of thinking around the life that you've had. And we had a gathering Friday night, and one of our grandchildren said, can you identify one of the most important memories you have of your 87 years here on this earth? And I made light of it, and it did lead me to think about this morning, and I'd like to do some thinking and sharing with you about the ways in which I think and I believe and I celebrate having been blessed. I'll start out by saying the blessing that has come to me over the last number of years have been two blessings. One, having been here before for 8.5 years, and now going on 5.5 years here. It has been just such a rich blessing for me. And I think Nancy has found that to be the case as well. And our children, when they have come for special events, have found this church to be such a blessing and such a inclusive, loving, and caring church. And so I want to share that. You have been a blessing to me, and I am grateful. There are other ways in which we can stop and think about perhaps a list. If you do the same thing when you get home today before you get to the Super Bowl game, think about the blessings. And sometimes the blessings are having gotten through some really tough times. There's a list, I'm sure, that each of us could share in private of the tough times we've had in our life, and times when we really did some things that were not kind and not thoughtful and inconsiderate, and times when perhaps we have begun to see a slipping or a loosening of our faith, and then we have said, whoa, what am I doing, where am I going? And it is the blessing that comes when someone forgives us. The forgiveness is, the memory is the blessing. But it is also a blessing when we recall that we've been forgiven. Forgiveness is absolutely awesome. It is a healing process so that indeed we can reconcile. And so if there is a short list or a long list that you have of the things that you've done that you wish you hadn't done but can't do over, except you can apologize for them, and in hopes that the person who hears the apology will forgive you. And then the invitation that comes from us, which is always perhaps even the second most difficult thing, is how not to let that happen again. That's a tough one. So thinking of those blessings, one of the blessings I've had in my life, and I suspect and I hope that each of you have had, is having been born to parents who really delighted in having you. They felt that awe and that wonder at the coming of this child into their life. Those are such rich blessings. I can remember being at the First United Methodist Church in Kenosha. It's an 1,800 member church. I'm the associate. I get to preach one Sunday morning, and Nancy is going to have our baby and our first child. And I said to them, we're going to have a child and it's going to be a boy. I was so pumped up and proud of the fact that we were having a child John was born. So I was really grateful for that. Each of our 3 children, the last 2, I was able to be there during the delivery. What an awesome and incredible and blessed experience to see that child come into the world and be part of a family. Our last son, when he was born, everybody left the delivery room, and I'm there with Tom, and he's in a warming tray, and he's got blankets on him, and I stroked him, and I told him how pleased we were to have him as part of our family, and that he would always be loved by us. Those are blessings, folks, and it's added such wonder and joy to our life as a couple and to our life as a family. My parents were good people. They came out of some rather traumatic beginnings. I think I may have told you, my mother's father died when she was at the age of 3.5 or 4. she was sitting on his lap when he had a coronary attack and instantaneously was gone. Grandma then became the sole provider along with an older brother. They were incredibly poor. The only way they had housing is that the railroad that went through Waseda, Michigan, northern Michigan, had a house that wasn't being used, and they allowed my grandmother, mother, and my mother's brother to live there. She was a grand lady, my grandmother, and lived to be into her late 80s, in spite of a lot of incredibly hard work and a lot of disappointment in her life. But she had a joyous spirit about her in terms of her love of God and her belief that you could get through the tough times and find joy in the presence of God then, and get through the happy times with your hands up in the air celebrating when you turn to God for guidance and direction and comfort. The other blessing that I wanted to share with you is that I was part of a family that really believed in the church and believed in God. My mother was a strong, strong person, and there was never any doubt but what Sunday morning we'd be in a pew. There was no question about it. But it was done with a great deal of affection and love. We oftentimes would be there for more than one time a week. Our youth group was an important part of my life. I got to be invited by the minister to do a youth sermon one Sunday. We did a sunrise service celebration for a couple of years out at the cemetery in Columbus, Wisconsin. And I had friends in high school who played instruments. We had them come out and we sang hymns in the cemetery and sang praises to God to the resurrection of Jesus. The church participation for me was positive, it was encouraging, it nurtured the questions I had and encouraged me to be involved in a way that was special and good. The other blessing I have is that, again, my family believed in giving. I think I've said to you that oftentimes we'd come into the house and we'd smell the aroma of fresh baked pie or buns or bread, and we were excited thinking we were going to get to eat them, and Mother would say, "No, don't touch those, they're going to the bake sale at the church." But the giving on the part of my parents was incredibly faith-oriented. They didn't have a lot of resources. I grew up not knowing we were poor, but the way in which we cared about others, cared about family, and cared about neighbors as well. We lived on a farm. When someone was in trouble, the community of farmers would gather together to help them harvest, to help them milk the cows, to help them take care of someone who had been injured or ill. It was that kind of life. We participated all through the year at the local Grange Hall in a little community, I think it was called Ring, which was near Columbus. And we'd go there for celebrations, for special anniversary gatherings, for activities that brought us together as a community and as a people. We got to know one another and cared about one another. That was really a blessing for me. Additionally, I grew up with parents who believed in a work ethic. And sometimes that's to my disadvantage because I think sometimes I overwork. But I grew up believing that work was a gift to God, that it was a way in which I could celebrate the opportunity to work, the opportunity to be engaged. And working was not a matter of having to earn income. And we didn't do it just to make money. We did it because that was who we were. Very early on, in high school, I mowed 2 cemeteries in our area, and I did that every day. And then I got to read the tombstone messages of who had died and when it had happened and how long they had lived, and saw the sad commentaries of little babies or children who had been buried there. So working has always been, for me, an enjoyable experience, and it keeps my mind and it keeps my body, I think, alive and fresh. One of the other things I would share with you, which is quite personal, is that the partner that we have had, each of us, Nancy and I, with one another, has been an incredibly rich blessing for us. 62 years we're going on, dated for 5 years at least. And some of you have heard the story, but Nancy's mother didn't like me. And she had good reason for it. I had been ill as a kid, had illness called chorea, which caused one side of my body to shake a lot. I had a rheumatic fever, a heart murmur, and Nancy's mother was worried that Nancy would have to support me in old age, or that I would become an invalid. She didn't like me because I was part of the wrong religious movement in the Christianity. And she didn't like the fact that I was going to be marrying Nancy because our family was poor. Well, Irma lived to be 97, and I got to be there when she came to our community 4 years earlier. And the very first thing I was able to do was help her stay alive by going as often each day as I could to help her eat, because she had difficulty. And she was in the hospital with MRSA and C. diff. She was just wasting away, let me tell you. After a while, she began to introduce me as the man who married her daughter, and we used to not like each other. She would say that to people. She's a great lady in many ways, a great spirit. 97 she lived to be. And I want to thank Nancy for being my partner. Thank you. It's a gift, a blessing. And I've joked, having lived with me for 60-some years, when Nancy dies, she'll go bodily to heaven, because it's not been an easy journey sometimes. But I appreciate that we are together and will continue to celebrate life. The other thing that I want to say to you in aging is maintain enthusiasm. Maintain involvement. There's a wonderful lady who lived in Lac de Flambeau who now lives out in somewhere out east near her son. She continues to be actively involved. She's well into her 90s, and she does not intend not to continue to be involved. And you can be involved in so many ways. The ways to be involved is to be a witness to your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren about the beauty and the wonder of life. Celebrate that. I'd love to occasionally get an invitation to look on Facebook and see the celebrations that 1 or 2 or 3 of you post that identify your excitement and joy about a bird at your feeding tray outside of your kitchen window, or the way in which you find joy as you think about the first snowfall, and at the age of whatever that person may be, you're still sticking out your tongue like you did when you were a little kid. Some folks have maintained that getting old is getting your second childhood. I think that's a blessing, frankly. It's a blessing to be spontaneous. It's a blessing to be joyful. It's a blessing to be a person of celebration and wonder. it's a blessing to be a person who's willing to listen to things that otherwise might be important to you. One of the joys of my life has been to participate with our grandchildren in the books they read, talking to them about their degrees and sharing with them articles I see on the internet, and I send them to them. What do you think about this article? More recently, I sent one of our grandchildren who's pursuing a PhD in mathematics and statistics. And I hear sometimes, oh. So recently I sent him an article about AI, a couple of articles, and I said, what do you think? And it's elicited a conversation back and forth about AI and how it both can be good and is potentially harmful. So stay connected with your grandkids. They are a source of great curiosity and great wonder, sometimes a lot of confusion. Listen to them, let them talk out who they are and what's going on in their minds. Stay fresh, stay alive. The exciting thing about that is that which Isaiah says, and I share it again with you as I read that passage. It is such an incredible passage. He, that is God, gives strength to the weary and increases power to the weak. Even the youths grow tired and weary, and young men and women, of course, stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength, will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. If you think of that as a metaphor, you can soar with your spirit. You can soar with your voice. You can soar with your joy and with your experience of awe and wonder at the wonders and the awe of nature. You can soar as you share yourself with your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And in the process, metaphorically, you will run and not be weary. You will walk and not faint. You will be filled with power and joy and wonder as you say, thank you, Lord, for your presence. Thank you for your Spirit. Amen.